George Strait sat in the cab of his old pickup truck, staring at Martha Hargrove's modest home. The Texas sun cast harsh shadows over the familiar road, a reminder of the years that had slipped away. Today he was here for a purpose, but a heaviness settled in his chest. Martha had fallen and broken her hip, and while he had promised to help her, he couldn't shake the feeling that this visit would lead him to confront deeper truths buried in the past. Taking a deep breath, George stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching beneath his boots as he approached the porch. Memories of childhood summers flooded back, the scent of lavender from Martha's garden, her warm laughter that wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. Would she still bring that same joy after all these years? Apprehension hung in the air, heavy and thick, as he knocked on the door. Moments later, Martha's face appeared in the doorway, a mix of delight and surprise illuminating her features. "George, it's been too long," she exclaimed, her voice shaky but warm as she leaned on her cane. "It's good to see you, Martha," he replied, forcing a smile. He stepped inside, greeted by the nostalgic smell of baked goods wafting through the kitchen. The familiar sights felt both comforting and daunting, stirring unease about the memories tangled with his family's complex history. "Join me for some coffee. It's fresh," she offered, moving into the kitchen. George followed, his heart racing. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Martha, I found some old letters recently. They hold stories about our family." Her expression shifted, concern etched into her brow. "Letters? Those can be heavy, George. Some truths are best left hidden," she said, the weight of her words hanging between them. "I think they contain something significant, something about the hurt we've buried," he admitted. The past loomed over them, threatening to unravel the fragile peace he had held onto. Martha's gaze softened. "If you want to understand your family, I may still have an old diary of your mother's. It could help," she said gently, offering a glimpse of hope and fear all at once. As she disappeared into another room, George's heart raced. Could uncovering old secrets provide the answers he needed, or would it deepen the wounds? The quiet felt oppressive in her absence, and his mind raced with possibilities. When Martha returned, clutching the diary, George felt a shiver run down his spine. He instinctively knew that delving into these old pages meant stepping into a world filled with loyalty, betrayal, and long-hidden scars. As he sat down at the kitchen table, the diary lay before him like a locked door waiting to be opened. The journey ahead was more than he had anticipated. It was less about helping Martha, and more about unearthing the painful echoes of his family's heart. Whatever lay within those pages could redefine everything he thought he knew. George sat at the kitchen table, staring at the diary that lay before him. Its leather cover was worn, and the edges had frayed just enough to reveal years of handling, memories begging to be unearthed. Martha's warm gaze met his, filled with concern as if she sensed the storm brewing inside him. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked delicately, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the diary. "I need to know, Martha. There's too much about my family that I've ignored for too long." His voice held a tremor, a mix of fear and determination. "Then let's explore it together," she replied, her reassurance swirling around him like a soft blanket. With a resolute breath, George opened the diary, revealing pages filled with his mother's beautiful handwriting. The rich scent of faded ink enveloped him, each letter intertwining with memories he had almost forgotten. The first passages reflected laughter and joy, family gatherings that echoed with music and filled with love. But as he turned to the next pages, the mood darkened. Woven through the warmth was a strain of secrecy that began to reveal itself. A gnawing anxiety twisted in his stomach. He looked up at Martha, who leaned in closer, sensing the shift in tension. "Your mother mentioned an uncle," she ventured, her voice quiet and weighted with history. "An uncle whose disappearance tore the family apart. They rarely spoke of him." "Why?" George asked, feeling an urgent need to unravel this mystery. Shadows from his childhood flickered in his mind, memories of hushed whispers and sidelong glances at family gatherings. "There were whispers of betrayal, of love lost," she replied, her eyes reflecting the sadness of years gone by. "Sometimes burying the truth feels easier than facing it." George's heart raced as he flipped through the pages, piecing together a narrative filled with both warmth and heartbreak. The words slid through his fingers, alive with emotion, revealing a bond between his mother and uncle that transcended time yet had been irreparably damaged. He read about a forbidden love affair that had thrust the family into turmoil, Each phrase felt like a heavy drop of rain, filling him with a melancholic reverberation. He could almost hear the laughter of family silenced by shame, the music of his past drowned out by the echoes of unacknowledged sins. What happened to him? George's voice wavered. Did they ever reconcile? Martha's expression grew somber. Your mother tried to reach out, but pride and hurt drove a wedge even further. Some wounds run too deep, and healing is a long and winding road. As George read deeper, he felt his mother's ache. The longing and regret poured into the pages. It became clear the conflicts that had shadowed his childhood were rooted in more than just miscommunication. They were stories of betrayal, love, and the painful choice to silence the past instead of confronting it. Did she ever forgive him? He whispered, clutching the diary tightly. The reality of unhealed wounds stirred his heart, creating a turbulent mix of sorrow and resolve. I believe she wanted to, Martha replied softly, her voice laden with empathy. But the fear of rejection and the weight of family expectations often hold us back. You have a chance to break that cycle, George. As he closed the diary, the weight of its revelations pressed heavily upon him. The delicate web of his family's history, once filled with light, now felt tangled in shadows. He understood now that he stood at a crossroads. This journey into the past was about more than just facing old wounds. Martha reached over, squeezing his hand. Understanding your history doesn't have to repeat the pain, Georgie. It can be a pathway to healing, both for you and your family. I want to honor my mother's legacy, he replied, determination filling his voice. But how do I confront the hurt without risking everything? By embracing vulnerability, she replied, her expression brightening. By acknowledging what happened and allowing that truth to shape a brighter future. It takes courage, but it can lead to a better understanding of yourself and those you love. With each word Martha spoke, the darkness within him began to fade, replaced by a flicker of possibility. He realized that history didn't just have to weigh down on him, it could serve as a guide toward understanding and forgiveness. And if I fail, he asked, vulnerability creeping into his voice. Failure isn't the end, she assured him. It's merely another step in the journey. Trust yourself, just as your mother once trusted her family, even when it was hard. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting gentle light through the kitchen window, illuminating the sanctity of their shared moment. Perhaps with each unraveling of the past, George could weave a new tapestry, one that honored those who had come before him, while also setting him free. He knew now that the road ahead would be difficult, laced with truths that could shatter illusions, but he was ready to embrace it. The echoes of his family would guide him, not bind him, as he would forge his path through the dense forest of their shared legacy. With renewed purpose, George closed the diary and placed it softly on the table. He could feel the threads of healing beginning to wind their way through the tapestry of his life. He looked at Martha and smiled, not just with his lips, but with a heart that was slowly gathering strength. The past needed acknowledgement, but it did not have to control his future. In that small kitchen filled with warmth, he could feel the first stirrings of hope, a whisper of music returning to his life, a song of healing beginning to play. Days turned into weeks, and George found himself enveloped in the world of his mother's diary. Each evening he sat on the porch, the warm glow of sunset spilling over the fields. The guitar rested in his hands, a familiar companion in the stillness. While the pages were filled with memories, they also conjured a yearning to share those stories through music once again. One evening, driven by a blend of excitement and anxiety, George picked up the phone to call Martha. The moment he heard her warm voice on the other end, he felt the weight of his revelations spilling forth. "Martha, I've been absorbed in the diary," he admitted, his heart racing. "It's opened up so many layers of my family's past, but it's heavy too." "What have you uncovered?" she asked, her tone encouraging. "It's about my uncle, the way my mother loved him even after what happened. It's a strange mix of heartbreak and connection," George shared, vulnerability creeping into his voice. "I'm glad you're facing this, George. Digging into the past can be painful, but it's a path toward healing," said Martha, her words wrapping around him like a warm blanket. "Can we meet tomorrow?" he asked, feeling an urgency to share his journey in person. "I want to talk about it more." "Of course, I'll have coffee ready for us," she said, and they exchanged goodbyes. The following day, George arrived at Martha's home, greeted by the comforting aroma of brewing coffee. As they settled at the kitchen table, he shared his thoughts and feelings, pouring his heart into each word. It's like I'm piecing together a puzzle of our family. It's inspiring, yet the shadows of the past loom large, he confessed, searching for reassurance in Martha's eyes. Every family has complexity woven into their story, George. It's about understanding those threads, she encouraged, her gentle smile urging him forward. In the days that followed, their conversations deepened. George pored over the diary with renewed passion and shared snippets of his discoveries with Martha. Slowly, he began to feel a shift inside himself, an awakening of creativity that had long been stifled. On a whim, he brought his guitar on one of his visits. "Martha, I've been thinking that maybe it's time to write again. These stories deserve a voice," he said, hope flickering in his heart. "Then let's hear it," she urged, her enthusiasm infectious. Taking a deep breath, George began to play a few tentative chords, melodies spilling forth as words poured from his heart. As he sang, vividly recalling the love and pain captured in his mother's entries, a sense of freedom enveloped him. Each note composed echoed his family's struggles, weaving a narrative that breathed new life into the past. When the last chord faded, a heavy silence fell upon them. Tears gleamed in Martha's eyes, a testament to the rawness of his song. "That was beautiful, George. It's authentic," she said, emotion threading through her voice. "I could feel the stories emerging," he admitted, almost breathless. "It's liberating to let that out." "Keep writing," she encouraged. "Your journey could inspire others to confront their own truths." Invigorated by her words, George felt a newfound sense of purpose. The act of writing was not just an avenue for expression, but a way to unravel the chains of secrecy and pain that bound his family. However, amidst that progress, lingering doubts crept into his heart. Would sharing his music with his family help them heal, or would it open deeper wounds? He struggled with the decision to face them, anxiously contemplating the invisible walls built around unsaid truths. One fateful evening, as he stared at the fading light of the horizon, George made a choice. He would gather his family, sharing the songs that had begun to shape his understanding of their shared legacy. He picked up the phone and called his brother, his heart pounding. "Hey, it's George. I'd like to get everyone together. It's important," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Sure. What's going on?" his brother replied, curiosity evident. "I want to share something meaningful," George replied, his determination solidifying with each breath. With plans laid out, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. But the more he rehearsed the songs, the more he envisioned them as bridges to the past, gateways to understanding and healing. As the day of the gathering approached, George grew increasingly anxious yet resolute. He rehearsed in front of the mirror, imagined his family's faces, and hoped they would hear his heart through the chords. Finally, as the family arrived, George felt both excitement and fear surge through him. But he knew this was his moment. Standing among those who had once inhabited shadows of his family's past, he felt a flicker of hope spark within him. He was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing he was walking a path toward healing. The echoes of yesteryear would not suffocate him. They would guide him toward a new beginning, one where love and forgiveness intermingled freely, paving the way for a future enriched by understanding and connection. The day had arrived, and George's heart raced with a cocktail of anticipation and fear as he stood in his living room watching the door. The sound of laughter and familiar voices drifted in from the kitchen, where his family had gathered, creating an atmosphere that hummed with life yet felt heavier than ever. He took a moment to breathe deeply, grounding himself in the present. This was his family, the people who had been intertwined in the fabric of his life, and today he would lay bare his heart in front of them. The weight of the past had led him to this moment, and he was determined to navigate it with honesty. As he walked into the kitchen, George was greeted by his brother first. "Looks like the prodigal son returns," his brother teased with a smile, lightening the mood slightly. "Good to see you," George replied, his voice steady yet nervous. The kitchen felt warm, filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals, but he could also sense the undercurrents of unresolved tensions lurking just below the surface. Family members started to trickle in. Laughter erupted as stories were exchanged, the laughter echoing off the walls like old memories stirring to life. Yet George felt a knot tightening in his stomach. The conversations seemed to dance around unspoken truths, shadows weaving through their interactions, as if everyone was afraid to confront the elephant in the room. After a round of chit-chat, George decided it was time. He gathered everyone's attention, their laughter fading to a soft murmur as they turned towards him. "Thanks for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it," he began, his eyes scanning the room filled with familiar faces. "There's something important I want to share today." The silence deepened, a weight anchoring the atmosphere. George felt vulnerable and exposed, yet he pressed on. "I've been diving into our family's past, particularly through Mom's old diary. It's filled with stories that echo with love, but also pain, stories that we haven't really talked about." A murmur went through the crowd, a mixture of curiosity and trepidation in their expressions. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. "I've also started to write some songs inspired by these revelations. They're my way of processing everything, of honoring our history and finding a way to heal." His brother frowned slightly, skepticism creeping into his expression. "What do you mean by that?" he asked. "You think a few songs will change anything?" George felt the sting of that question, but he remained firm. "It's not just about the songs. It's about acknowledging what's happened. It's about facing the things we've buried underneath our pride and regret." Silence hung heavily, the tension rising like steam in the air. George could see uncertainty flickering in his family's eyes. What had he opened with his declaration? "It's about Uncle Joe," George continued, deciding to steer the conversation gently. "I found out a lot about him in the diary, about the love he shared with Mom regardless of what caused their rift. And until now I had no idea how much pain lingered from that loss in our family." His mother's sister spoke up, her voice trembling with emotions. "Your mother loved him deeply. She spent years grieving his absence. We just tried to protect her by keeping quiet." "Did it protect her, though?" George challenged gently, feeling his own emotions swell within him. "Did burying the truth really help anyone? It only kept us all apart." He felt the room shift. Something unspoken began to unfold. His aunt's shoulders slumped as her eyes glistened. "We didn't know how to deal with it. It's easier to pretend everything is fine." "Fine isn't enough anymore. We've lost so much time," George pleaded, his voice earnest yet tender. "What if we could finally confront the past together? This song, it isn't just for Mom or Uncle Joe. It's about us and how we've allowed silence to block our love." With shaking hands, he picked up the guitar he'd set beside him. The weight of the instrument felt grounding, a connection to something greater. He strummed the first chords, the familiar melody tugging on every unspoken emotion. As he sang, the notes flowed like a river, weaving between pain and tenderness, infusing life into the shadows that once loomed over their hearts. As George poured out his heart, he watched his family's expressions change. Initial apprehension softened, replaced by vulnerability and understanding. His brother wiped away a tear while their aunt began to nod along, recognizing the universal themes of love and loss captured in his song. When the last note faded, the room maintained a charged silence. Hearts opened wide, and breathless moments stretched between them. Finally, his father cleared his throat. "This is hard, son, but you've opened something we can't ignore. There are truths we've hidden away for too long." George's heart raced, feeling hope seep through the cracks of long-stifled pain. What if we share our stories, our memories? What if we allow ourselves to feel this collectively? His mother's sister nodded slowly, breaking through the fog. "It's going to take time to heal, but perhaps we can start by being honest with each other," George's brother interjected. "I think we all need to talk about Joe. It's been buried too long, and it hurt Mom more than any of us realized." As they started to share their own memories, George sat back, letting their voices blend into a symphony of healing. Old wounds were slowly laid bare, but in their midst began a palpable sense of unity. The pain transformed into understanding, and through their stories, they breathed life back into their family's narrative. The evening wore on, and laughter intertwined with tears as they recounted tales laced with both heartbreak and joy. It was a cathartic release, and George realized this moment was the turning point he had longed for, a step into the light after years spent in shadow. In that room filled with love, stories, and music, they forged a new path, one of honesty, connection, and healing. The echoes of their past no longer loomed ominously. They became a foundation for growth, igniting within them a sense of shared responsibility for their legacy. As the night came to a close, George felt an overwhelming gratitude for his family. He knew there would be more songs to write and stories to weave, but this was just the beginning, a true testament to the healing power of love, story, and unwavering connection. The morning after their family gathering dawned bright and hopeful. George sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee warming his hands, the sunlight spilling through the window like golden honey. He felt lighter, his heart buoyed by the connections forged the night before. He was ready to embrace the next chapter of his life, one where he could share the stories and songs that emerged from the depths of his heart. His thoughts drifted back to the songs he had begun to write. Each note felt like a thread weaving together the family tapestry he had once considered frayed and broken. They were no longer just melodies. They had transformed into vessels for healing and unity. George reached for his notebook, the pages filled with lyrics reflecting his emotional journey. He flipped through the entries, words painted with the colors of love, loss, and redemption. Something profound happened. The process awakened an inspiration he had long thought lost. He began to pore over his diary lines, developing songs that captured the nuances of their shared experience and the raw beauty of confronting pain. With every word, he felt a sense of purpose blossoming within him. The rebirth of his creativity charged him with a desire to share his work beyond the family circle. Maybe it was time for more than just healing. Perhaps it was time to share this new music with the world. George envisioned performing at one of the local venues, perhaps the old honky-tonk down the road where he had first strummed a guitar. This place held memories, laughter, heartbreak, and the unmistakable energy of connection through music. He felt a magnetic pull to return, to test the waters, and see how this new chapter of his musical life would unfold. That evening, he took the plunge and called the honky-tonk bar. "Hey, it's George Strait. I'd like to book a slot to perform some new songs," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his stomach. "George Strait, of course. It's been a while, but the stage is yours," said the excited voice on the line. That affirmation grounded him. He hung up the phone with a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. The thoughts of stepping back onto that stage filled his mind, visions of bright lights and the energetic pulse of the crowd fueling his determination. As the days unfolded leading up to the performance, George continued to write and refine his songs, fueled by the hope and connection forged with his family. Each evening, he would practice in the living room, the familiar notes becoming a comforting soundtrack to their home. Martha would often stop by, offering encouragement and feedback, her presence a constant source of support. "Do you think they'll connect with the stories?" George mused one night, sitting across from her with a guitar in hand. "Absolutely," she replied, a determined glint in her eyes. "You're channeling deep emotions, George. People crave authenticity. They want to see the real you." Inspired by her belief, George felt the doubts slip through his fingers like grains of sand. He longed to convey not just his journey, but the collective experience of those who had faced familial pain and sought healing through unity. When performance night arrived, the honky-tonk buzzed with the energy of familiar faces and new friends assembled tonight. The worn wooden floors and rustic decor radiated warmth, bringing back waves of nostalgia. George set up on the small stage, the low lights casting a soft glow that wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. As he began, the opening chords of his first song rippled through the room, drawing in every listening ear. His heart thrummed with anticipation. He shared the song inspired by his mother's diary, the heartfelt lyrics connecting with the crowd, revealing pieces of his family battles born from love and grief. With each strum of the guitar, George saw faces light up, nodding, smiling, and even tearing up. He felt the magic of music intertwine with healing. It was more than a performance. It was an act of reclamation. He could sense people resonating with the stories wrapped in melodies, could see them sharing their own experiences, reflected in his words. As he moved on to another song, George's confidence grew, ignited by the warmth of their acceptance. Recognizing that vulnerability was the heartbeat of his music, he shared stories that connected the lyrics to the moments he had shared with his family, stories about love lost and newfound connections. By the time he reached the last song, he was fully immersed, his heart in the rhythm of every note. This final piece was the culmination of everything he had learned, a powerful anthem about hope and unity, celebrating the rebirth of his family's narrative. As the last note resonated and a hush fell over the crowd, it was as if they collectively held their breaths, suspended in the moment. When applause erupted, it echoed like a powerful wave through the honky-tonk. George beamed, the warmth of acceptance wrapping around him. With sweat on his brow and a smile on his lips, He stepped back and took it all in. His heart surged. He had shared a piece of himself and, in turn, connected deeply with those who filled the bar. This was the power of music, a bridge that spanned hearts and souls, creating connections where silence had once prevailed. After the performance, people began to approach him, sharing their stories and reflecting on how his music touched them. The healing continued as they exchanged laughter, tears, and memories, the space between them filled with newfound understanding. As George looked around the room, feelings of gratitude swept over him. It was powerful evidence of his mother's legacy, how love, however strained, could give rise to purpose and connection. Later that night, as he returned home, George sat at the kitchen table, replaying the evening in his mind. His heart felt full. He took out his notepad, ready to capture the magic that had unfolded, the songs that would resonate far beyond the boundaries of their family. In that stillness, he realized how far he had come and how intertwined the journey had been, from healing hidden truths and reconnecting with family to reclaiming his voice through music. With every note, every memory shared, he transformed pain into beauty, creating space for healing in his heart and in the hearts of others. In that moment of reflection, George made a silent promise. He would continue to honor his family, their stories, and the love that connected them all. He was ready to embrace this new life, where music held the power to bridge the past with the present, guiding them all into a brighter, shared future. As weeks turned into months, George's life began to fill with the vibrant colors of his newly rediscovered voice. The honky-tonk performances had become a regular source of energy, allowing him to share the healing songs he had crafted from his family's past. The small venue, once just a backdrop for his music career, now felt like a sanctuary where stories mingled with melodies, each performance bringing them closer together. One evening, after yet another triumphant performance, George returned home to find Martha waiting for him on the porch, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of a nearby lantern. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "I heard how it went tonight," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm spilling over. "You're connecting with people in ways that matter, George. You're changing lives." George chuckled, a warm flush settling in his cheeks. "You know, it feels like I'm part of something larger," he replied, settling next to her. "It's not just about the music anymore. It's about healing and honoring our histories." Martha nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And have you thought about taking this further? Maybe record an album? Share these stories beyond our town?" The idea struck George with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The notion of laying down a collection of songs that encapsulated his family's journey was both daunting and exhilarating. "I've considered it, but the thought of sharing all of these memories, it's a lot," he confessed. "Consider it your legacy," she urged gently. "Your music can lift others who are grappling with their own stories. Don't hold back." As Martha's words washed over him, the realization began to sink in. Music had a way of bringing secrets into the light. Perhaps his songs, born from love, pain, and ultimate reconciliation, could guide others on their path to healing. The next few days were filled with frenetic energy and creativity. George enlisted the help of local musicians who had become dear friends, forming a band that would carry these stories forward. They practiced tirelessly, each rehearsal further solidifying his resolve. He pored over his notes, contemplating which songs would fashion the narrative he wanted to share. Each piece felt like a brushstroke in a magnificent painting. As they prepared to record at a modest local studio, George confronted his fears. He could almost hear the echoes of past doubts whispering from the shadows. Would what he create resonate? Would they truly hear the authenticity behind each note? With renewed determination, George pushed those doubts aside. One early morning, as he gazed out at the Texas sunrise painting the horizon with strokes of gold and pink, a sense of peace enveloped him. He was ready. The day of recording arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement and nerves. George stood in the studio, feeling the weight of microphones and instruments surrounding him. His bandmates gathered, anticipating the magic they were about to create. They exchanged encouraging smiles, their own journeys contributing to a shared purpose. As they began to record, every note sprung forth and filled the room, weaving layers of sound that harmonized beautifully. George sang with passion, laying bare every moment of his family's story, concealing nothing. The journey from pain to forgiveness flowed through his words, bringing life to the album that reflected their shared legacy. During breaks, George took time to reflect on the emotions he unwrapped through music. He thought about the evening he shared stories with his family, realizing how those connections blossomed into something transformative. Each encounter had stitched together their past, offering space for healing. This album felt like a continuation of that journey, a dedication to resilience. With each session, the songs took shape, becoming more profound with every recording. This wasn't merely a collection of melodies, it was the expression of a lineage, a tribute to the love and loss that had defined them. As the final notes settled and the recording wrapped up, George felt an overwhelming mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. They had captured the essence of his journey, sculpting a legacy that resonated with both beauty and truth. In the following weeks leading to the album's release, George felt an energetic buzz throughout the community. Word spread, anticipation mounting. The opportunity for a larger audience to hear their collective stories beckoned. Finally, the night of the release party arrived. George stood backstage, his heart racing. The honky-tonk had been transformed, adorned with lights and decorations celebrating their new music. The atmosphere pulsed with a mix of excitement and nostalgia, a reunion of the community he cherished. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause, their love boosting him as he prepared to share his new songs. The beams of light illuminated familiar faces, friends, family, and even those he had yet to meet. At that moment, he understood how his music had touched lives and built connections, even extending beyond what he could see. The first notes floated through the air, gentle and inviting. The melodies soared and dipped, carrying fragments of his family history into the hearts of those gathered. George could feel their energy, each song drawing people closer together. As he reached the final song, a wave of joy surged through him. "This last song is for everyone who has ever faced struggle and found the strength to forgive," George spoke into the microphone, his voice filled with gratitude. "It's about how we move forward, together." With the last chord resonating, silence blanketed the room, then erupted into cheers and applause. George allowed the moment to wash over him, realizing the profound impact of what he had built. As the night wore on, he felt a strong sense of contentment. Surrounded by family, friends, and a vibrant community, George was living proof that shared stories could create profound connections, weaving lives together in a shared tapestry of human experience. In that moment, he was not just George Strait, the country singer. He was George Strait, a storyteller, connected deeply to the roots of his past. With music as his guide, he had transformed pain into beauty and built a legacy that would echo through generations. He smiled, his heart swelling with love, knowing that this journey would continue as long as there were stories to be told and songs to be sung. Together, they could illuminate the path for others, showing that healing was possible when embraced with authenticity, love, and the pulse of music. In the weeks following the album release, George immersed himself in a whirlwind of activity. The response to his music was extraordinary. Fans reached out sharing how his songs spoke to their own experiences. It was a beautiful affirmation of the journey he had undertaken. One afternoon, as he sat on the front porch of his childhood home, notebook in hand, George reflected on all that had happened. The melodies born from his family's history had become more than just songs. They served as a bridge to connection and healing. His phone buzzed, breaking the serene moment. It was Martha. "You'll never guess who just called. A producer from Nashville wants to collaborate." A rush of excitement and apprehension coursed through him. "Nashville? Wow, that's amazing," he replied. "It could be a huge opportunity to share your music with an even wider audience," she encouraged. Yet doubts crept in. Was he truly ready for such a leap? Memories of past insecurities surfaced, but he reminded himself of how far he had come, from family struggles to finding his voice. He realized that the essence of his music was rooted in authenticity. He had a story to tell. After a few days of contemplation, George decided to embrace the opportunity. "I want to do it," he called Martha, his voice steady. "Let's see where this takes us." As he arrived in Nashville, the city buzzed with energy and possibility. Stepping into the studio for the first time, he felt a vibration of creativity in the air. Surrounded by talented musicians and producers who believed in the power of storytelling, George felt a surge of inspiration. The days spent recording were filled with magic. Each song they crafted was deeper and more nuanced, reflecting not only his family's journey, but the universal experiences of love, loss, and healing. George poured himself into every note, revealing a vulnerability that resonated with every musician in the room. "I think this is going to be special," a producer said after they captured a particularly poignant track. George felt a swell of gratitude. He was harnessing the stories that had shaped him, creating music that echoed with truths many felt in their own lives. The album was completed, and the anticipation for the launch built quickly. On the evening of the release party, George stood backstage, a mixture of nerves and excitement swirling within him. The venue was filled with familiar faces, eager to hear his new music. When he stepped onto the stage, the crowd's energy enveloped him. As the first notes filled the air, he poured his heart into each song, sharing the stories that connected them all. With every chord played, he felt the audience lean in, captivated. "This last song is for everyone who has ever faced struggles and found the strength to forgive," he shared into the microphone, his voice steady and heartfelt. The final note resonated, and a moment of silence passed before the crowd erupted in cheers. George soaked in the love and acceptance, realizing the true impact of what he had built. In the weeks that followed, he continued to share his music, each performance deepening the connections with his audience. With each song, he recognized that he was now not just a performer, he was a storyteller guiding others through their own journeys. As he looked out into the crowd, he saw varied faces, each reflecting a journey of their own. He knew now that music was a lifeline extending far beyond the stage. It was a way to honor and embrace the legacies of those who had come before him, forming a thread that connected their lives. In that moment, he made a promise to himself. He would carry his family's stories forward, using his music to illuminate the path for others. George Strait understood now that the journey would continue, a never-ending exploration of shared experiences through the power of song. With a smile on his face and love in his heart, he recognized that each note played, each story shared, was a testament to the beauty of healing and connection. This was just the beginning. Together, through music, they would find hope, love, and solidarity, guiding one another into brighter days.